I knew your husband, Widow, and I know what he found out here the night he died.
The horse jerked sideways when the small figure stepped into the path, and the Apache scout caught the reins tight before the animal threw him. The child stood so still it seemed carved from dust, a broom in one hand, eyes too wide for a face that young. The scout breathed out slowly, calming the horse, but the child never blinked. He felt something coil at the base of his spine, a warning he trusted more than sight or scent. The porch behind the child held two more figures, both sweeping in slow, steady strokes that didn't match the rhythm of living children. Coda guided the horse a step forward, keeping his voice low. "Easy. I see you." The oldest girl paused mid-sweep but didn't lift her gaze. The boy beside her let the broom drag in a long arc before returning to that same hollow motion. Something was wrong here. Something deep. He walked toward them with his hands loose at his sides. He didn't want to spook them, though they didn't look capable of running. The older girl, maybe 12, held her broom like it was a shield. Her brother, younger, kept his eyes locked on the scout's feet as if counting every step. The smallest one clung to a post, sweeping the same 5 inches of porch plank without pause. The scout stopped a few feet away. "Where's your family?" The children didn't answer. The brooms kept moving. "Do you live here alone?" Silence. Just the rustle of straw brushing wood. The smallest child blinked quickly, too quickly, like nervous ticks holding back panic. Coda lowered his voice. "I'm not here to take anything. I'm just passing through." Still nothing. The girl shifted, only a fraction, and he followed her eyes. He followed her gaze toward the house. The windows were dark. A door hung crooked on its hinge. Wind rattled loose boards like teeth chattering in fear. The ranch looked abandoned except for these 3 children moving like ghosts tied to chores they didn't choose. He tried again. "My name's Coda. I'm just passing through." No reaction. "I'm not here to hurt you." The girl's jaw twitched. The broom trembled in her hand. He stepped onto the porch, slow, measured. The boards groaned beneath him. The smallest child stopped sweeping for the first time and leaned back against the post as if bracing for something unseen. Coda raised both hands to show he carried no threat. "All right. Tell me this. Did someone send you out here?" The girl's throat tightened. Coda crouched to their height, trying to meet their eyes. "You don't have to talk. Just nod yes or no." The girl blinked once, the boy twice, the youngest didn't move. "Are you alone?" No answer. But the way the air thickened around them told him enough. The girl finally inhaled, a short breath like she'd forgotten how. Coda softened his voice. "I'm here now. If someone hurt you, tell me." She shook her head quickly, but her eyes said something else. The boy whispered something too soft to catch, but the way he leaned toward his sister told Coda he was asking permission to speak. The sister's hand tightened on the broom. She whispered something back. The scout couldn't hear it, but the tension between them crackled like something about to snap. The children's sweeping grew faster, frantic. Coda stood and scanned the yard. Tracks. Not old. A single horse moving in a slow loop. Someone had watched this place recently. Someone patient. His pulse tightened. He moved closer to the girl. "I need to know if you're in danger." The girl's throat bobbed as she looked at him, then at the road behind him. She wasn't choosing silence, she was choosing survival. Coda exhaled through his nose. "All right. Let me try another way." He pointed to the barn. "Anyone in there?" The girl hesitated, then lowered her gaze. The boy shuffled a step closer to Coda, as if pulled by something older than trust. The youngest child's broom fell from his hand and hit the porch with a brittle crack. He touched the girl's shoulder gently. She didn't flinch, but she went still, like a deer listening for the final step of a hunter. "Look at me," Coda said. She did. "If I check the barn, will something come out?" Her breath hitched. Not fear of him. Fear of the barn. She didn't answer with words. She didn't need to. She raised her hand slowly, pointing toward the structure. It wasn't a command. It was surrender. Coda nodded once. Stay here. The boy grabbed his sleeve. Coda looked down at the small trembling fingers gripping tight, begging without sound. The scout placed his other hand over the boy's, steady and warm. I'll be right back, he murmured, though the boy's eyes said he'd heard that lie before. Coda steadied the boy's grip before easing free, promising with his eyes he would return. The wind shifted, carrying the rattle of the barn's roof. He stepped off the porch with measured resolve, each footfall blending into the uneasy quiet they all shared. He kept walking. He kept walking, feeling the weight of the children's eyes on his back. The dirt path toward the barn was narrow and uneven, shaped by years of hooves and hurried footsteps. The wind carried dry dust across his boots, but the only real sound behind him was the faint scrape of straw bristles as the children began sweeping again, slower now, as if the rhythm itself kept them from falling apart. Coda stopped a few yards from the barn door. The structure leaned slightly, like it had been pushed by storms or something inside had tried to get out. He waited, listening. Nothing. No breath, no shift of weight, no animal pacing. Just that brittle quiet that made the skin on his arms rise. He turned his head toward the porch. The oldest girl stood frozen, her broom held to her chest. The boy hovered behind her, half hidden, and the youngest pressed himself into the post like he was trying to disappear. Coda raised his hand in a slow motion, telling them he saw them, telling them he wasn't afraid to go farther. He pushed the barn door with his fingertips. It creaked, long and low, like a warning that had run out of patience. The scent hit him first: old hay, sweat, and something faintly metallic. He stepped inside. Sunlight slipped through gaps in the wooden walls, slicing the space into narrow beams. Dust swirled in each one like restless spirits trying to form a shape. His hand drifted automatically toward the knife at his hip. He walked down the center aisle, boots soft on the dirt. An overturned bucket, rope frayed at the end, a stool cracked down the middle. Signs of struggle. He crouched and ran his hand along the disturbed soil. 2 sets of adult prints, one dragging, one sure and heavy. And smaller prints too, children's, scattered like frightened birds. He looked up at the wall beside him. Carvings. Jagged, uneven, desperate. Some in English, help US and don't trust the badge. But mixed into the scratches were symbols he recognized, pieces of an old Apache warning script. Not words, but shapes that meant danger, betrayal, death from inside the circle. His heartbeat thudded once, hard, behind his ribs. Someone had carved these in a hurry. Someone who knew enough Apache to warn him. Someone who wasn't Apache themselves. He rose slowly, turning his head toward the far corner of the barn. That's where he felt it, the echo of a presence left behind. Not a ghost, not a myth. Something human, but twisted by cruelty. He stepped closer. A stain darkened the ground near the back wall. Blood, days old. He touched it with the edge of his fingers. Dry. Cold. Violent. A whisper brushed through his memory, his sister's voice from years ago. Don't leave me here. He blinked hard, shaking off the old ache that never fully left him. This wasn't the past. This was something happening now. Something that involved 3 silent children outside, sweeping because someone had forced them to. He turned away from the wall just as the barn door creaked again. For a second, he thought something was entering, but it was only the wind catching the door and shoving it wider. Bright light spilled across the dirt floor. He walked toward it, ready to leave, ready to return to the children. Then he saw it. A sheriff's badge nailed right into the doorframe. Not just nailed. Burned. Charred around the edges like someone had heated the metal and pressed it into the wood long enough to leave a black halo. Coda touched it with one fingertip. Still slightly oily. Whoever did this hadn't wanted to hide. They wanted it seen. They wanted whoever found the children to believe the law owned them. He stepped outside and the wind hit him harder than before, lifting dust across the yard. The children had stopped sweeping again. The girl's eyes were locked on him, waiting to see what he'd found. He walked back toward them, each step sinking into the dirt like the ground itself didn't want him returning with the truth. When he reached the porch, he knelt again, eye level with the oldest girl. Her knuckles were white around the broom handle. He kept his voice low and steady. "I saw the badge." Her throat tightened. "You know who it belongs to?" She blinked once. "Agreement." "He put it there?" Blink. "Why?" No answer. Her lip trembled, then steadied as if she scolded herself for letting too much show. Coda looked at the bruises on her wrists, faint but shaped like fingers. He looked at the boy's dirt-smudged face, the youngest child's bare feet curled inward like they wanted to step away from memory itself. These children weren't silent by choice. Silence had been beaten into them. He tried again. "I need to know if he's coming back." The girl's gaze shifted to the road behind him, then back to his face. Slow. Deliberate. A warning more powerful than words. Coda leaned slightly closer. "You don't have to talk. Just show me." Her fingers loosened on the broom, then tightened again. The boy whispered something into her sleeve, muffled and fast. She whispered back, too soft for Coda to hear. The youngest moved behind her legs, peeking around her skirt with wide, wet eyes. Finally, the girl raised one arm. Not toward the house. Not toward the open road. She pointed toward the barn. Coda frowned. "There's nothing alive in there." She shook her head once, sharply, then pointed again, slower this time. "Behind the barn, not inside." Coda followed her gesture. A narrow trail cut behind the structure, partly hidden by brush. Someone had been using it. Recently. He rose to his feet, hand drifting to the knife at his belt. The girl stepped forward and touched his coat, just enough to stop him. Her voice was barely a breath. "Careful." It was the first word he'd heard from any of them. Coda nodded once, the promise silent. He stepped off the porch again, toward the trail behind the barn. And the girl pointed to where the danger waited. And the girl pointed to where the danger waited. Coda followed the line of her arm toward the narrow trail curling behind the barn, half hidden by old brush and a leaning fence post. The air felt tight there, like it had been holding its breath long before he arrived. He moved slowly, listening for anything that didn't belong. The children stayed on the porch, watching him with their brooms held like anchors. Even from a distance, he felt the weight of their fear pressing against his back. The trail dipped slightly, then bent behind the barn into a strip of ground shaded by warped planks. He saw fresh scuff marks in the dirt where someone had turned their boot sharply. He crouched and traced the mark with his fingertip. Not a child's. A grown man's. Heavy. The kind of step made by someone dragging something or someone. He stood again, scanning the back wall of the barn. Boards bulged outward in one spot, bowed as if something had struck from inside or pushed from outside. The shape wasn't clean. Not one impact, but repeated blows. He stepped closer, touching the warped wood. It throbbed faintly beneath his palm. Not literally alive, but the echo of struggle was so strong it felt like breath. A pressure. A tremor of memory trapped in the fibers. He swallowed hard and pressed his ear to the plank. Nothing at first. Then a faint groan as wind slid through cracks, carrying a whisper-like moan that almost sounded human. He drew back, jaw tightening. He circled the corner and re-entered the barn, moving toward the spot where the wall had bowed. The smell here was stronger, sweat, rust, and something else beneath it, something sour. The carvings on the walls caught his eye again. This time, he saw words he'd missed, etched lower where sunlight barely reached. Mama hid us. Another beside it, he comes at night. And near the floor, carved deep enough to splinter the wood, don't let him smile. A cold ripple ran down his arms. He stepped back, trying to imagine the small hands that had gouged these warnings. The fear they must have carried while carving them. The desperation to be heard by anyone who might stumble in. His chest tightened. He remembered another child, another silent plea. His sister at 8 years old, clutching his shirt when raiders had dragged their family from camp. He remembered her soft voice whispering, "Don't leave me here," right before a gunshot ended her fear forever. The ache hit him all over again. The children outside weren't her, but the look in their eyes, the hollow endurance, felt too close. Coda blew out a slow breath, grounding himself. This wasn't the time to drown in memory. He walked deeper into the barn, following a faint trail of dried mud and scattered hay. At the far stall, he stopped. A rope dangled from the beam above, frayed at the end, fibers torn unevenly. Under it, grooves dug into the dirt where someone had struggled, kicking or clawing to break free. He knelt and touched the grooves. They were small. Small as a child's hands or feet dragging wildly. He closed his eyes for 1 second, fighting the wave of anger rising in him. When he stood, he moved toward a barrel in the corner. Something glinted behind it. He nudged the barrel aside and found a small tin cup crushed flat. Beside it, a torn scrap of cloth with faded flowers printed on it. A little girl's dress, ripped at the hem. He pocketed the scrap gently, as if it still belonged to a living child. A sharp creak snapped his attention. He spun back toward the open doorway. The children were there, closer than before, standing just inside the threshold. Their brooms had been dropped outside. Their fingers gripped the doorframe. All three stared at him with wide, waiting eyes. The girl whispered first. "You saw it." Not a question. Coda nodded. "Yes." The boy stepped forward. He put Mama in the dark. His voice trembled, not from cold but memory. "And he made us stay quiet." The youngest leaned against his siblings, eyes fixed on the ground like he didn't want to see anything else. Coda crouched to meet them, lowering himself slowly. "You carved those warnings?" The oldest girl shook her head. "Mama did the first ones. We did the rest." Her voice thinned. "We tried to tell someone." Coda asked softly, "Did anyone come?" She swallowed. "One man." He laughed. She hugged her arms. "Said the sheriff would fix everything." Coda felt the anger rising, hot and sharp, but he kept his voice level. "You did right to warn me." He reached out and gently touched the carved Mama hid US on the wall near them. "She tried to protect you." The girl blinked hard, fighting the tears that threatened to break the fragile shell she kept around herself. The boy stepped closer to Coda and clutched his coat. The youngest crawled onto Coda's knee without asking, curling into him with the tired instinct of a child who had run out of fear and strength. Coda wrapped an arm around the smallest child, steadying him. "It's all right," he whispered. "I'm here now." The girl looked up sharply, fear flickering through her eyes. "If you stay, he'll come back." Her voice cracked. "He always comes back." Coda tightened his hold on the smallest child. "Then I won't leave you alone." The girl's breath hitched, half hope, half disbelief. A sudden breeze blew through the barn, rattling the loose boards. The sound snapped all three children into panic. Their brooms dropped from their hands outside, clattering on the porch. They bolted toward Coda at once, clutching his clothes, his arms, his belt, their bodies pressed tight against him like they were bracing for impact. Coda steadied his footing, holding all three. And outside, the world fell silent in a way that told him the danger wasn't gone. It was waiting. The sun was sinking behind the rim of the plains, turning the whole sky into a burning sheet of copper. Sarah stepped out onto the porch, her shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. Coyotes yipped somewhere in the distance, and the ranch felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that made a widow listen for dangers that weren't yet there. Inside the house, little Eli slept on the sofa, still exhausted from the fever that had kept her awake half the night. But something else was keeping her awake now. A sound. A horse. Slow. Heavy. Controlled. Not a neighbor. Not a drifter passing through. Not a drunk who'd lost his way. A deliberate visitor. Sarah's fingers tightened around the Winchester leaning against the doorway. When she stepped off the porch, boots crunching lightly on the cold dirt, she saw a shape riding through the dusk, tall, rigid, dark coat shifting like a shadow with its own mind. Her stomach knotted. It wasn't the cowboy from the barn. This man rode different. He carried the air of someone who didn't ask for permission. The kind of man who either brought answers or trouble. The horse stopped a few yards from her fence line. The rider stayed mounted, hat low, but his voice carried clearly across the chill air. "Evenin', Mrs. Hale." Her heart slammed. Mrs. Hale, her married name. She hadn't heard anyone say it since before her husband was lowered into the Wyoming soil. "How do you know me?" she asked, barrel lowering slightly but not enough to be friendly. The man dismounted in one smooth, practiced motion. Dark boots hit the ground. A long coat brushed against spurs that jingled with a metallic whisper. He didn't reach for his gun. He didn't have to. "Name's Marshal Rowan Pike," he said, raising his hands just enough to show them empty. "I've been tracking a dangerous man. He rode through these parts some days back." A breath caught in Sarah's throat. She didn't know why, but the cowboy in her barn came to her mind instantly. The marshal studied her face. "I see that got your attention." Sarah forced her voice steady. "Lots of men ride through these parts. Not men with blood on their name." Her pulse jumped. "What did he do?" she asked carefully. The marshal stepped closer to the fence, boots sinking into the dying light. "He's wanted for murder," the marshal said. "A man who killed the wrong people, then disappeared across county lines. Been chasing him near a month." He watched her eyes search his face. Then he dropped the part that made her breath freeze. "Your husband's name came up." The world seemed to tilt. Sarah grasped the fence rail to stay upright. "My husband?" "Marshal, my husband died in an accident. A ranching accident." "That's what the sheriff said." "That's what you were told," Rowan Pike said softly. "But it ain't the truth." The dusk swallowed all color, leaving the ranch in cold shades of gray. Sarah shook her head slowly, her hands trembling. "My husband wasn't murdered." The marshal's jaw tightened. "I'm afraid he was." A wind swept through the yard, lifting strands of her hair and carrying the faint, cold smell of the oncoming night. Sarah could barely breathe. The marshal's next words felt like a gunshot. "And the man who killed him is the same man I'm hunting." Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. The cowboy sleeping in her barn. The stranger she fed. The man with pain in his eyes. "What's his name?" she whispered. Marshal Rowan Pike's expression darkened to something grave and final. "Calder Wade." Sarah's fingers went numb around the fence rail. Calder Wade. The name hit her like a blow, foreign yet familiar, a shadow she somehow recognized without ever hearing it before. The marshal's voice hung in the cold air, firm and unforgiving. "I aim to bring him in alive," Rowan Pike said. "But if he forces my hand, the law will answer." Sarah swallowed hard, forcing her voice to steady. "You're certain he's the one?" "Certain as the dust on my boots." The marshal stepped closer, eyes trained on her like he was reading every flicker of fear on her face. "He's dangerous, Mrs. Hale. The kind of man who leaves broken things behind him, bodies included." Her breath shook. But inside her chest, something twisted in conflict. She had seen Calder Wade's eyes, quiet, haunted, careful. A man carrying something heavy, yes, but she'd felt no threat in him. Just sorrow. And pain. And something else she couldn't yet name. She forced herself to respond calmly. "Marshal, I haven't seen anyone suspicious. This ranch has been quiet." A lie. Heavy as lead. The marshal studied her for a long, uneasy moment. The kind that made the silence feel like a noose tightening. Finally, he spoke. "I'll be camping by the creek tonight. If you see anything, or anyone, you'll send word." It wasn't a question. It was an expectation. He tipped his hat and mounted his horse, riding into the rising moonlight without looking back. Only after he vanished beyond the ridge did Sarah realize her legs were shaking. Back in the barn. The scent of hay hit her as she pushed the barn door open. The lantern flickered softly, casting long shadows across the stalls. She could hear quiet breathing, calm, even. Calder. He slept on the old cot, arm draped over his chest, his gun belt laid neatly beside him. He looked younger like this. Not dangerous. Not murderous. Just tired. Sarah stood for a long moment, watching him. Could this man truly have killed her husband? The thought clawed at her chest. Her boots scuffed against the floor. Calder's eyes snapped open. He reached for his gun, but stopped when he saw her. "You all right, ma'am?" His voice was gentle. Worried. Real. Sarah swallowed hard. There was no easy way to say it. A marshal came by. Calder stiffened instantly. Muscles tightening. Jaw clenching. A storm moving behind his eyes. Sarah continued. "He's hunting a man. Says that man's dangerous. Says he's wanted for murder." Calder's breathing slowed. Measured. Controlled. "And what else did he say?" Calder asked quietly. Sarah forced herself to hold his gaze. "He said, the man he's hunting is named Calder Wade." Silence swallowed the barn whole. Calder closed his eyes once, like he'd been expecting this moment, dreading it, carrying it like a wound that never healed. When he spoke, his voice was low and cracked at the edges. "Then I reckon you deserve to hear the truth." He sat up, elbows on his knees, hands trembling for the first time since she'd met him. "I didn't kill your husband, Mrs. Hale." The words pierced her like a knife. She staggered a step back. He lifted his eyes to hers, eyes full of grief so deep it nearly stole her breath. "But I was there," he whispered. "And I know who did." Calder finally breaks open the past, revealing a truth Sarah wasn't prepared to hear. The barn becomes a confessional, raw, tense, and dangerous as memory, guilt, and fear twist together. The children overhear more than they should. Calder's words hung between them like a loaded gun. "I was there. And I know who did." Sarah's throat tightened. The barn felt suddenly too small, too warm, too close. "Tell me," she whispered. Calder rubbed his palms together, slow and nervous. "Another first. I ain't proud of the man I used to be." "Tell me," she repeated, sharper now. He drew a long breath. "It was dark. Same way it is tonight. Your husband, he was trying to protect someone." Sarah blinked hard. "Protect who?" Calder hesitated, real hesitation, like the next words could kill him. "That little girl sleeping in your house," he said quietly. "The youngest one." Sarah's heart lurched. "What are you talking about?" Calder's jaw worked, fighting memory. "Your husband found her on the road. Alone. Scared. He took her home. The men chasing her, they didn't like that." "Who?" Sarah stepped closer, desperate now. "Who was she running from?" Calder's eyes lifted, and for the first time she saw true fear. "Men I used to ride with." The barn went dead silent. Sarah's voice trembled. "You were an outlaw?" "Not in the storybook sense," Calder muttered. "But I rode with men who did whatever they wanted. Hurt whoever they pleased. The girl, she saw something she shouldn't have." Sarah shook her head slowly. "This makes no sense. My husband never told me." "'Cause he didn't want you in the crosshairs," Calder cut in. "He made a choice. A brave one. He hid her. Fed her. Promised he'd keep her safe." Sarah's pulse hammered. She had known the girl was not kin to the two boys, but she never imagined this. Calder's voice dropped as if confessing to a priest. "When my old crew came looking, they figured your husband took her. They'd beat him till he fell. But he wouldn't talk." Sarah covered her mouth. A sob tried to escape. Calder kept going. I got there too late. I tried to stop him. I fought one and knocked him cold. But before I could get the girl out, your husband was already bleeding out in the dirt. He died protecting her? Her words broke in half. Calder nodded once, throat tight. He looked me in the eye and said, "Keep her safe." And then he was gone. Sarah turned away, gripping a post before her knees gave out. Minutes passed without a sound. Finally she spoke, voice small. "And the boys?" "They weren't with her then. They came after," Calder said. "Found her hidin' in an old shed. They ain't blood. None of them. Just kids run out of places to belong." Sarah pressed her forehead against the wood. "How long have they been running?" "Too long." His voice carried decades of regret. "But they ain't runnin' anymore. Not if I can help it." Sarah spun back toward him. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you care?" Calder's expression softened, a rare, fragile thing. "Because your husband asked me to. Because that little girl clung to my leg like I was the last tree in a flood. Because I'm tryin', Mrs. Hale. For the first time in my life, I'm tryin' to do right." Footsteps creaked behind them. Both turned sharply. The oldest boy stood in the doorway, face pale, fists clenched, breathing ragged. "You lied to us," he whispered. The youngest girl peeked from behind him, eyes wide and glossy. Calder's voice went soft. "Kid, listen." "No," the boy snapped. "You said our past was burned up." "Gone." "It ain't gone," Calder said, tired and honest. "It never was." The girl's lip trembled. "Is someone coming for us?" Sarah stepped forward before Calder could answer. "No one's touching you," she said, fierce and maternal. "Not while you're under my roof." Calder looked at her, startled, maybe humbled. The boy stared at both adults, weighing whether to believe them. After a long moment, he whispered, "Then what do we do now?" Calder exhaled. "Now," he said, "we prepare." The lantern flickered hard against the barn walls, making their shadows stretch long and strange, as if the past itself had joined them. The scout kept the horse steady as the flames behind them shrank into a dull glow, swallowed by the rising dark. The children leaned into him, bone-tired, their bodies trembling from cold and shock. He kept one arm around them, trying to give what little warmth he had left. The trail narrowed through cedar thickets, branches brushing their clothes like fingers reaching for the living. The horse snorted and shook its head, unsettled by the tight dark pressing on both sides. "Stay awake," the scout murmured, voice low. "You fall asleep now, you might slip." The oldest girl mumbled, "We're trying." "Good," he said. "Just keep your eyes open." The youngest boy let out a thin whimper, barely a sound. The scout shifted him forward. "Easy. You're safe here." "Is he coming?" the smallest asked. "Not tonight," the scout said. "Not if I hear him first." He scanned the trail ahead, the trees bending in heavy shapes that made the dark feel older than the land itself. He could feel the kids watching him, searching his face for any sign of doubt. He forced his jaw to relax even though his heart had been thudding since they left the burning ranch. "Tell us something," the girl said, her voice a shaky whisper. "What kind of something?" "A story." He breathed out slowly. "All right. A small one." He kept his eyes forward. "Long time ago, my grandmother told me about a spirit that walked the hills. It wasn't mean. It just followed people who were lost. Stayed right behind them so they wouldn't fall into a ravine or wander into bad water." "That real?" the middle boy asked. "It's real if you need it to be." The children went quiet again, resting against his shoulders. Their breathing slowed. The scout thought they'd finally drifted off when the smallest boy jerked awake and whispered, "Did you hear that?" The scout stiffened. "Hear what?" "That voice." "What voice, son?" "The sheriff calling." The other two children tensed. The girl shut her eyes tight, as if bracing for something she had already lived before. "He's not here," the scout said softly. "There's no one out there." "But we heard him," she whispered. Every night before Mama, she cut herself off, swallowing against whatever memory clawed at her throat. The scout kept his tone steady. "Sometimes fear keeps talking long after the danger's gone. It's just fear. That's all." The boy pressed his head into the scout's chest. It sounded like him. The trees thickened, the air growing colder. The horse stepped carefully over stones hidden under the cedar needles. The scout shifted his weight, keeping his hand close to the rifle slung across his back. Something felt off about the trail, too quiet, too still, as if the land itself had pulled in a breath and refused to let it go. "You three listen," he said quietly. "If I tell you to hold on, you hold tight." "Okay," the girl whispered. "We will," the middle boy added. The whispering started then. Not words, not the wind, but something thin and distant, like breath brushing the back of a neck. The scout went completely still. The children heard it too. He felt them clutch at his coat. "Don't look around," he said. "Just stay close." The horse halted, ears pinned forward. A faint glow flickered through the trees ahead. Then another. Then several more. Lanterns. Too many to be travelers. Too ordered to be lost men. The scout lowered his voice. "Riders," he said. The girl's fingers dug into his arm. "It's them." "Maybe," he said. "Maybe not. But we aren't turning back." He guided the horse forward as the lantern steadied in a line across the trail, blocking the path. Shadows of mounted men stretched long and crooked across the dirt, waiting without a word. The scout felt the children's breaths shaking against his ribs. He kept riding toward the lights. The scout slowed the horse but didn't stop. The lanterns ahead held steady, forming a wall of light across the narrow trail. The riders behind them sat motionless, silhouettes carved out of the dark. Their faces were hidden, but the way they held their shoulders told him everything: men who believed the night belonged to them. The horse tossed its head, uneasy, but the scout laid a calming hand on its neck and kept moving. When he was close enough to see the glint of rifles, one rider urged his horse forward. "Evenin'," the man said. His voice carried the smug ease of someone used to starting trouble, not ending it. "Trail's closed tonight." The scout didn't blink. "Why?" "Orders," the rider said. "We're looking for 3 runaways." The children pressed tighter against the scout's ribs. He could feel every tremor. He answered, "A lot of trail to cover for 3 kids." "Yeah," the rider said, tilting his head, "unless you've seen 'em." The scout stopped the horse 10 paces from the line of lanterns. "You're in my way." "We're in the judge's way," the rider corrected. "He's particular about what belongs to him." The scout's jaw hardened. "Children don't belong to men." "You sure about that?" the rider asked. A few of the others chuckled under their breath. The oldest girl found her voice, a soft whisper into the scout's back. "Don't let them take us." "I won't," he murmured. The lead rider leaned closer, lantern light revealing a face carved by arrogance. "You know who you're talking to?" "No," the scout said. "Don't care." "Bold," the rider said. "Stupid, but bold." Another rider called out from the line, "Judge says those kids were rescued from a bad situation." "Sheriff signed the papers." "Sheriff signs a lot of things," the scout replied. "Now you're making this political," the first rider warned. The scout kept his eyes steady. "No. You are." A murmur passed through the group. The riders didn't like being challenged. Their hands drifted toward holsters, not drawing, just reminding him they could. The lantern swayed slightly in the cold wind, throwing long shards of light across the dirt. The children held their breath behind him. The first rider squinted at the scout. "We do this simple or we do it ugly." "Simple," the scout said. "You move aside. I ride through." "That ain't simple," the rider said. "Simple is you hand over what you're hiding behind your back." The scout lifted his chin. I'm not hiding anything. You sure? Positive. The middle boy whispered, he'll hit you. The scout murmured, not before I move first. The rider's gaze flicked downward, catching a glimpse of a small hand clutching the scout's coat. His smile widened. There it is, he said. Judge pays good money for loyalty. Sheriff too. Bringing those kids in will make my week. The scout felt the girl's fingers dig harder into his side. Another rider nudged his horse closer. We know who the woman was, he said. We know where she's buried. The oldest girl tensed. The rider smirked. You kids want to tell the scout where your mama's lying? Shut up, the girl whispered. The man laughed. Or what? You gonna cry again? The scout's voice came out low and sharp. You leave her alone. Oh, she talking to you now? The rider asked. Funny how she kept quiet for us. The girl's breath shuddered. She whispered, barely audible, they hurt Mama. The words hit the air like a hammer. The riders shifted. Their smirks faltered. A couple of them exchanged uneasy glances. The scout caught that moment, thin, fragile, but real. So you do know, he said. The first rider stiffened. Mind yourself. You know what happened at that ranch, the scout pressed. None of your business. It is now. The rider lifted his chin. You're a skin for trouble you can't handle. I've handled worse, the scout said. The lantern light wavered again, as if the wind wanted this moment to collapse. The men weren't confident anymore. They were calculating. Nervous. The children's trembling breaths filled the small pocket of silence between both sides. The scout tightened his grip on the reins. Move aside. No, the rider said. Last chance, the scout replied. I said no. Before the scout could respond, the oldest girl leaned forward and whispered into his coat, please, just take us home. Her voice wasn't loud, but it broke something in the air. The riders recoiled, as if hearing a ghost. Her words weren't supposed to surface. She wasn't supposed to speak at all. The scout steadied his breathing. You heard her, he said. We're riding through. The riders hesitated. Fear, real fear, flickered in their lantern-lighted faces. And slowly, grudgingly, the trail block bent. Just enough space for a single horse to pass. The scout nudged his horse forward, the children clinging tight as they slipped through the narrow opening, leaving the riders staring after them in shaken silence. They rode past the last lantern without looking back. The scout kept his shoulders squared until the darkness swallowed the riders completely. Only then did he let the horse slow to a gentler pace. The children stayed pressed against him, as if any space between them might let danger slip in. The path widened as they reached a dry clearing. Moonlight broke through enough for the horse to see its footing. The oldest girl lifted her head. They knew, she whispered. Knew what? The scout asked softly. She hesitated, eyes losing focus, as if staring at something far behind her. About Mama. We'll talk, he said. Not here. But the girl shook her head. No. You need to know now. The youngest boy whimpered. Don't tell it. The middle one clenched his jaw. It's already told. The scout eased the horse to a stop beneath a twisted cedar. He turned slightly so he could see their faces. All right, he said. Tell me. The girl swallowed hard. Mama tried to run. Not with us at first. Just herself. She wanted to get help and come back for us. Her voice wavered. But the sheriff caught her. The scout felt his chest tighten. Where? At the well. The boy whispered, he pushed her. The smallest added, down the water hole. The scout kept his breathing slow. You saw this? They all nodded. The girl's voice broke. He said she didn't belong anymore. Said the judge would take us in and make us useful. Mama screamed until her voice was gone. They dropped a board over the well so no one would hear. The middle boy wiped his nose on his sleeve. We did. What did you hear? The scout asked. Her, trying to breathe. The smallest boy clutched the scout's coat as if it were the only solid thing in the night. We tried to pull the board. But they hit us. Then they made us sweep. Said it'd keep us quiet. The girl added, said sweeping would teach us obedience. The scout didn't move for a moment. His hands tightened around the reins, knuckles hard as bone. And the men at the trail? They were there too, she said. They held the ropes. Cold anger ran through him, slow and steady. Why didn't they take you right away? The girl looked down. Mama wouldn't let go of the rope they lowered. They didn't want to climb down there with her. The scout shut his eyes briefly. The image settled in his mind: cold stone, rope fibers, a woman clinging to life while men above discussed ownership like cattle. When he opened his eyes, his voice came out calmer than he felt. Your mother fought for you. She died alone, the girl whispered. No, he said. She died resisting. That's not the same. The children breathed shakily, taking in the words like they weren't sure whether they were allowed to believe them. The scout looked toward the dark stretch of land. How long ago? 3 days, the oldest said. They kept us locked inside after. Judge said he needed papers. Sheriff said we needed to stay useful until he returned. And when did you escape? Tonight, she said. When the barn door latch broke. We ran and hid by the porch. And started sweeping? We didn't know what else to do, the middle boy whispered. It's what we always do. The smallest added, Mama said sweeping keeps bad things calm. The scout frowned. What bad things? The children exchanged a silent look. Not confusion, fear. The girl pointed weakly toward the south. The well ain't just a hole. It's old. Older than the ranch. Mama said it remembers everything that falls inside. The scout felt a chill. Memories don't hurt people. Some do, she whispered. He didn't argue. The fear in her voice wasn't imagination. It was recollection. He straightened, guiding the horse toward a narrow cattle trail leading away from the clearing. We're leaving this land behind. You're not going back. What if they follow? The middle boy asked. They will, the scout said. But I'll be ready. The girl touched his shoulder. You believe us? Every word, he said quietly. The children relaxed against him for the first time since he'd found them. He gripped the reins, eyes fixed on the shadowed hills ahead. We'll get to shelter soon. Then I'll decide what comes next. A small voice rose behind him. What comes next? Justice, he said. The horse moved forward, leaving the clearing behind, the truth of the woman in the well settling over the night like a heavy, unbreakable vow. The scout guided the horse deeper into the hills, following the narrow cattle trail until it thinned into loose stone and brush. The night grew colder, the air sharp enough to bite. The children leaned against him, half asleep but still shivering. He shifted them closer, steadying them as the terrain grew rough. Far ahead, the canyon opened like a dark jaw in the earth, quiet, hidden, known only to the few who'd used it long before the ranch ever stood. When they reached the canyon floor, the moonlight caught the faint outline of an abandoned mission built into the rock wall. The scout slowed the horse to a stop. The worn stones looked ready to crumble, but they'd survived generations, they would survive tonight. He dismounted and lifted the children one by one, setting them gently on their feet. The girl looked up at the mission. Is it safe? Safe enough, the scout said. No one comes here. The middle boy glanced at the shadows. Why not? People don't like old places, he said. Too many reminders. He pushed open the mission door. The hinges groaned but held. Inside, cold air pooled like something waiting. Dust coated the floor, untouched. Cracked benches lined the room, angled beneath a stone altar that had long since lost its color. An old bell lay broken in one corner, its surface split down the middle like a wound. The children stepped in carefully, their footsteps echoing. The youngest whispered, "Feels like somebody's here." "That's just silence," the scout said. "You'll get used to it." He gathered driftwood from the canyon floor and built a small fire in an old basin. The flame rose softly, casting warm light across the cracked walls. The children sat close together, letting the heat fill the cold places in their bones. The scout knelt beside them. "Let me see your wrists." They hesitated, then held them out, thin, bruised, rubbed raw from rope. He cleaned the skin gently, his movements slow and steady. The girl winced but didn't pull away. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're hurt," he said. "That's reason enough." The middle boy asked, "Why'd you help us at the ranch?" "Didn't plan to," the scout said. "But you were there. And you didn't speak. That told me everything." The girl studied him. "You lost someone too." He didn't respond at first. The fire cracked softly. "Yes," he said. "A sister." "What happened?" "She disappeared when I was your age. No one looked for her. People said it wasn't worth the trouble." "That's wrong," the girl said. "Yes," he answered. "It is." He stood and walked toward the altar. Something looked out of place, stones pushed slightly outward, as if disturbed recently. He leaned in, sliding his fingers along the gap. A loose brick shifted. Behind it, a small hollow glowed faintly from firelight. He reached inside and pulled out a bundle of old letters tied with fraying twine. He returned to the children. "What are those?" the middle boy asked. "Old words," the scout said. "Messages someone didn't want forgotten." He sat beside them, untying the bundle. Most letters were too faded to read, but near the bottom he found one sealed with a familiar mark, an embossed crest shaped like a branded spur. The girl gasped. "That's the judge's mark." "Yes," the scout said quietly. He opened the letter. Inside, the writing was newer than the others, not yet eaten by time. The words were sharp, confident, written by someone who believed no one would ever see them. The judge spoke of land seizures, forced transfers, and payments owed by a mining syndicate waiting to expand. The ranch, the children's home, was listed plainly. The girl leaned in. "They wanted to take it." "They planned to," he said. "And Mama tried to stop them," she whispered. "Looks that way." The youngest boy scooted closer. "What does it mean?" "It means your mother knew more than they wanted her to," the scout said. "And she paid for it." The children went silent, eyes lowered. He folded the letter carefully and slid it into his coat. "What now?" the girl asked. He met her eyes. "Now we finish what she started." The fire dimmed slightly, the canyon wind brushing against the old walls like a restless ghost. The scout looked toward the mission door, listening for footsteps that he hoped wouldn't come. For tonight, the canyon held them. But he knew dawn would bring trouble with it. Dylan rode at the front, reins tight in his fist, eyes sweeping the terrain as dawn burned pale along the ridges. The group moved quietly, too quietly for a ride that carried this much fear. Dust rose behind them in a thin ribbon, drifting into the cold morning. The three silent children clung to their saddles, watching Dylan as if he alone kept the world from swallowing them. Maria rode close. "We should rest them," she whispered. They barely slept. "No stopping," Dylan said. "Trail block wasn't the sheriff's only trick. They're pushing riders ahead of us. I can feel it." "Feel or hear?" she asked softly. Dylan shook his head. "Both." Daniel's horse sidled up. The old rancher eyed Dylan carefully. "Scout, you think they'll hit us before the ridge?" "They'll try," Dylan said. "But the ridge plays to us. Steep sides. One way up. They'll have to come head on." Maria's jaw tightened. "And the kids?" "They stay behind me," Dylan said. "No matter what you hear. No matter what you see." Those words chilled everyone, though he spoke them as calm as a man ordering coffee. The forest around them thickened as the trail narrowed. The pines leaned inward, branches whispering against each other. The sound was faint, eerie, like distant voices murmuring through cloth. The smallest child, the girl, tugged Dylan's sleeve. She still hadn't spoken a single word, but her wide black eyes warned him of something ahead. "I know," he told her quietly. "They're close." Her fingers tightened on him, trembling. Maria saw it. "She senses it, doesn't she?" "Same way I do," Dylan replied. "Forrest speaks to her too." Maria shivered. "Forrest speaking ain't supposed to be real." Dylan said nothing. He nudged his horse forward. Up ahead, the trail bent to the right, too sharp, too sudden. Dylan lifted a hand, signaling halt. The others froze. Dylan slid from his saddle and crouched low, touching the dirt. Fresh hoof prints. Rough pattern. Rushed. Heavy riders. At least 8. He glanced back. "They're waiting on the bend." Daniel cursed under his breath. "Ambush?" "A bad one," Dylan said. "They think we'll panic and rush in blind." Maria leaned down. "So what do we do?" "We make them think they guessed right." He stood, mounted smoothly, and turned to the silent kids. "When we move, you don't look ahead. You look only at me. Understand?" The children nodded. Dylan drew his rifle and rode forward slowly, stopping a dozen paces before the bend. The forest around him rustled with that low whisper, like it was holding its breath. A voice barked from the bend. "Dylan Blackcrow. Sheriff wants you brought in alive, but he don't care how rough." Dylan answered calmly. "Your sheriff's got soft ears if he thinks you can carry me." Laughter from the bend. Then a man stepped out, rough coat, white stance, rifle aimed steady. "Drop the gun, Scout." Dylan didn't move. "You block the trail on a bend, you better expect someone smarter." Another rider emerged behind the first. Then another. 8 total, just like Dylan counted. Maria whispered behind him, "Dylan." He raised a hand to steady her. The lead rider sneered. "You're walking into the sheriff's hands. You're outnumbered." Dylan smiled faintly. "No. You are." The forest fell silent. Too silent. Then the whispering returned, not wind, not branches. Something deeper, rolling through the trees like low chanting. The riders heard it. Their horses pawed nervously. "What in hell is that?" one muttered. Dylan tapped his temple. "Forrest ain't on your side." The whispering grew louder. The riders shifted, jittery. One horse reared violently, throwing its rider into the brush. Another bolted sideways, slamming a man against a tree. "Hold your animals," the leader yelled. But the animals weren't listening. The silent children clung together as the sound surged, swelling like a rising storm. Dylan leaned low in his saddle, speaking softly to his horse in Apache. The animal steadied. Maria's horse trembled but obeyed her hold. Daniel Whisper cursed but managed his reins. The ambushers weren't as skilled. "We pull back," one shouted. "We hold," the leader barked. But the forest whispered louder, like hundreds of voices breathing warnings and threats. The riders panicked. 2 fled into the trees. One dropped his rifle and stumbled backward, terrified. The leader tried to aim at Dylan. "This is some trick." "Stop it." Dylan rode forward, slow and fearless. "No trick," he said. "Just truth." The leader fired, but the shot went wide as his horse reared. The gun flew from his hand. Dylan closed the distance, grabbed the man's collar, and slammed him flat into the dirt. The man groaned, breath knocked out. Dylan stood over him. "Ride back to your sheriff. Tell him he's chasing ghosts in a forest that remembers." The man nodded desperately. Dylan stepped back, rifle steady. "Go." He scrambled onto a panicked horse and vanished down the trail. Maria rode up beside Dylan. "What now?" Dylan looked at the children, then the ridge ahead. "We climb," he said. "Whispers only get louder from here." The forest answered with another low murmur like agreement. The climb to the ridge was slow, the trail narrowing to a thin cut of rock that forced them single file. The sun had barely cleared the horizon, washing the ridge in pale gold. Below them stretched a sea of dark pines, restless with the same whispering that had driven the ambushers running. Dylan didn't look back as he led the line. But he felt the weight of everyone's fear pressing against him, Maria clinging tight to her reins, Daniel scanning the woods like something might leap out, and the three silent children glued to his horse's tracks, trusting him more than the earth beneath them. Halfway up, Maria called softly, "Dylan, the whispers, they're louder here." "They want us moving," Dylan replied. "Forrest knows what follows." "You think those riders regrouped?" Daniel asked behind her. "They won't be the only ones," Dylan said. "Sheriff will send heavier hands now. Men who don't scare easy." Daniel spat. "He must want them kids bad." "He don't want the kids," Dylan said. "He wants what they witnessed." Daniel shifted uneasily. "You think they saw something at that burned ranch?" Dylan didn't answer. The children did, by going still, their small bodies tense. The smallest girl gripped her saddle horn, knuckles white. Maria saw it. "They know," she whispered. "They remember," Dylan corrected. A gust of cold wind swept the ridge, carrying that strange forest murmur. But this time, the sound changed, becoming clearer, sharper. Almost words. Almost direction. Dylan stopped his horse. "Hear that?" Maria stiffened. "I don't like it." "It's warning us," Dylan said. "Something's waiting on top." He slid from his saddle. Maria hissed, "Dylan, don't you walk ahead alone." "I have to." He turned to her. "If we all ride into it blind, we don't get a second chance." She bit her lip but didn't argue. Dylan moved forward on foot, rifle ready, boots crunching over dry stone. The ridge flattened ahead, a wide platform lined with old junipers, their twisted shapes clawing at the sky. Between them stood something that made Dylan stop cold. Tracks, fresh ones. But not horses. Wagons. Big wagons. 4 of them. He crouched, touching the grooves. Heavy. Deep. Loaded. Headed toward the western descent. Maria reached him, breath shaky. "Sheriffs?" "No," Dylan said softly. "Too big. Too clean." Daniel arrived next and cursed. "Political wagons, like the ones that carry ballot crates, courthouse ledgers, important things." Maria stared at him. "You saying this ties to the governor's family?" "Dynasty's got money," Daniel said bitterly. "Got secrets too." Dylan stood slowly. Ranch burned. Kids taken silent. Sheriff chasing shadows in the woods. And political wagons moving through a ridge no one uses. He looked at the tracks long and hard. "This ain't coincidence." Maria turned to him. "So what now?" "We follow," Dylan said. But before they remounted, the youngest child tugged Dylan's coat. Her eyes were wide, terrified not of the wagons but of what lay past the ridge. She pointed to the western slope. Dylan squinted. "What do you see?" No answer. Just trembling. Then the whispering shifted again, soft at first, then bending into something like a warning cry sweeping up the ridge. Maria clutched her reins. "Dylan, that ain't normal wind." Daniel whispered, "Feels like the forest's scared." Dylan mounted. "Move. Slow." The descent was steeper than the climb, snaking through jagged rock outcrops that cast long shadows. The whispering followed them like a living thing. The horses snorted, uneasy. Halfway down, Dylan raised a fist. "Stop." Maria froze. "What?" He pointed ahead. Across the slope, maybe 200 yards away, moved a line of riders. Not sheriff's men. These were too ordered. Too silent. All wearing dark coats. All armed with long rifles. Daniel's voice cracked. "That's a damn private militia." "Dynasty men," Dylan said. Maria inhaled sharply. "Then the wagons, they're guarding something big." Dylan's tone sharpened. "They're not guarding. They're hiding." He watched the men vanish behind a ridge of red stone. Maria leaned closer. "They didn't see us." "Lucky." "No," Dylan said. "Forest hit us." Whispering pulled wind against their line of sight. Daniel blinked. "The forest is helping us?" Dylan didn't answer. He wasn't sure the forest was helping. It felt more like the forest was trying to keep them alive long enough to show them something horrible. He urged his horse again. "We circle wide. Stay low." They slid along the slope, keeping rock between them and the militia riders. The children stayed tight behind him, eyes locked on his back. They didn't speak, but their fear was sharp enough to feel. As they reached a narrow trough in the hillside, Dylan spotted something half buried beneath brush. A boot. Then a hand. A whole body. Maria gasped. "Oh God." Dylan knelt. The man wore a sheriff deputy badge. Bullet wound to the head. Execution style. Daniel shook with anger. Sheriff's men being killed by the dynasty? Why? Dylan closed the man's eyes. Because the sheriff ain't in charge anymore. He's working for someone stronger. Maria whispered, and we're riding straight into it. Dylan stood, gripping his rifle hard. No. We're riding ahead of it. He looked west, where the wagon tracks led. Whatever they're moving, whatever the kids saw, it's waiting down that slope. The forest whispered again, louder, darker. Dylan breathed out. Ride. They rode. No one spoke for the first mile down the slope. The wind carried the same uneasy whispering, a low hum threading through the pines like breath from something ancient. The slope leveled into a scrub clearing, and the wagon tracks sharpened, fresh ruts cutting straight toward a narrow gorge ahead. Dylan slowed his horse. Tracks go in there. Daniel frowned. Gorge is a dead end. Not for 4 heavy wagons, Dylan said. Means there's another way out. Maria scanned the cliff walls. Or something waiting. The children clung close, eyes darting between shadows. The oldest boy tapped Dylan's arm and pointed to the dirt beside the wagon ruts. Dylan dismounted. Show me. The boy knelt and brushed aside dust, revealing a carved insignia burned into the ground itself, like a hot brand had been pressed into the earth. A rising sun over a shield. Maria's breath caught. That's the governor's family crest. Daniel swore under his breath. Why the hell is that burned into the dirt? The oldest boy stepped back, trembling. The youngest girl grabbed Dylan's coat, shaking her head violently. Maria knelt beside her. Sweetheart, what is it? The girl pushed her hands together in a shape, 2 circles overlapping. Dylan frowned. A symbol? No, Daniel muttered. A seal. That family uses a double ring seal on their private orders. Maria's voice went tight. What would a political family want with 3 kids sweeping a ranch? Dylan looked at the children slowly. They weren't sweeping. They were hiding. The oldest boy flinched. Daniel whispered, hiding from who? Dylan stood. From whoever burned that ranch. And it wasn't outlaws. Maria hugged herself. So the sheriff's chasing us to tie off loose ends. Or deliver them back to the dynasty, Daniel muttered. The whispering surged suddenly, sharp, insistent. Dylan snapped his head toward the gorge. Forrest says don't go straight in. Maria whispered, then how do we follow? Dylan pointed to a thin break in the shrubs lining the cliff, barely wide enough for a horse. Through there. Quiet. They slipped off the main trail, pushing through thick brush. Branches scraped their coats. The children stayed silent, but Dylan could feel them studying the gorge like it was a memory they didn't want to relive. They emerged on a narrow ledge halfway up the gorge wall. Dylan crouched low, motioning the others to do the same. Below them, the wagon convoy sat in a line, 4 heavy wagons parked in the shade of towering stone. Men in dark coats stood guard. No laughter. No talking. Only sharp posture and rifles held ready. Maria whispered, "What are they doing?" Dylan studied the wagons closely. Waiting for something. Daniel leaned in. "What's on the tarps?" Dylan narrowed his eyes. The wagons weren't carrying crates at all. Each wagon had a long, coffin-shaped mound under canvas. Maria stiffened. "Dylan, those are bodies." Daniel's face drained of color. "Bodies? That many?" "Burial cargo," Dylan whispered. "But not for a cemetery. Those are too clean. Too deliberate." The oldest child whimpered, barely a sound, but full of dread. Maria touched Dylan's arm. "They've seen this before." Dylan nodded once. Below them, one of the militia men lifted a tarp corner. Maria covered her mouth. The corpse beneath wasn't burned. It wasn't wounded. It was pale, smooth, waxy, as if drained. Daniel whispered, horrified, "What the hell?" Dylan shook his head sharply. "Not now. Listen." A rider approached the wagons, a tall man in a black coat, iron-straight posture, strange calm in his movements. Maria whispered, "Is that?" "Yes," Dylan said darkly. "The governor's son." Daniel tensed. "What's he doing here?" "Personally?" The governor's son spoke to the men below, short, clipped words. Dylan strained to hear. "Seal it tight. No witnesses. Sheriff's delay bought us time." Maria turned to Dylan, eyes wide. "They're using the sheriff." "And cleaning up whatever those kids saw," Dylan muttered. The youngest child covered her ears. The boy pulled her close. Below, the governor's son continued, voice colder than the wind. "Bring the children back if you find them. Alive. They remember the signal. They remember the fire." Maria grabbed Dylan's sleeve. "Signal? Fire?" "Dylan, that ranch." He nodded grimly. "Wasn't an attack. It was a purge." The whispering in the pines surged again, rising, almost pleading. The governor's son lifted his head suddenly, like something brushed his senses. Maria froze. He felt the whisper too. Dylan held still as stone. The man scanned the ridge. His gaze swept dangerously close to their ledge. Daniel whispered, "If he looks 10 feet higher." "He won't," Dylan said softly. Forests pulling the wind again. Sure enough, a sudden gust pushed dust and pine sent down the gorge, clouding their spot. The governor's son frowned, then dismissed it. He signaled to his men. "Move the wagons." Wheels creaked. Horses snorted. The convoy began rolling deeper into the gorge, toward a hidden exit Dylan hadn't seen before. Maria whispered, "We follow, right?" Dylan shook his head. "No. We get ahead. They're going somewhere the kids know." He turned to the 3 silent children. "Show me." The oldest boy hesitated, then pointed to the far end of the gorge, where the canyon walls narrowed to a slit of stone. Maria whispered, "What's back there?" The boy finally spoke, voice small, breaking. "Home." Dylan felt his blood turn cold. Maria whispered, terrified, "Their real home?" The boy nodded. Daniel looked between them slowly. "So the burned ranch wasn't where they came from?" Dylan tightened his grip on the reins. "Ride," he said again, but softer this time, like the word was a prayer. "And they did."